The last day of death row. Inmate Oba Chandler, you are killing an innocent man. Hi everyone. On the surface, he looked like someone's grandpa. Quiet, aging, even harmless. But behind the calm exterior of Oba Chandler lay the twisted mind of a career criminal whose charm masked something far darker. In 1989, a mother and her 2 teenage daughters vanished during a Florida vacation. Their bodies later found floating in Tampa Bay. For years, their case went cold, until a scribbled note and a single palm print exposed the truth. Chandler had lured them onto his boat with a smile and a lie. More than 2 decades later, his time finally ran out. But as the state prepared the gurney, he had one last surprise, a final note claiming innocence. Was it desperation, denial, or just another manipulation? In today's true crime story, we take you inside the chilling final 24 hours of Oba Chandler, from his eerie silence to the haunting final twist he left behind. Stay with us. You won't forget this one. Dear friends, as the morning sun rose over Florida State Prison on November 14, 2011, Oba Chandler woke up for what would be the last time. 17 years had passed since his conviction, and now he was on 24-hour death watch. Once defiant and belligerent in court, Chandler had become frail, his health broken by years in a cramped concrete cell. Heart disease, kidney failure, high blood pressure, and arthritis had eaten away at him. And yet, through it all, he had never once uttered a word of remorse, not to the families, not to the courts, and not to his own attorney. At his side during those final hours was attorney Bia Harrison III, who had fought his last appeals. He doesn't even talk about guilt anymore, Harrison said, but he stopped saying he was wronged too. He's just done. Indeed, the legal battles were long over. A week before, Chandler's final petition had been denied, making his execution, Florida's 71st since the reinstatement of the death penalty, official. Up in Ohio, Hal Rogers got the call. The state was moving forward. Rogers, whose wife Joan and daughters Michelle and Christy were the victims in this case, was at his workshop when the phone rang. A broken combine had kept his hands busy, but the memories never stopped. Years ago, he'd kissed his family goodbye as they set off for their first out-of-state vacation. A week later, their bodies were found tied with cinder blocks in Tampa Bay. The last person to see them alive had been a man who offered directions and then invited them on a boat ride, Oba Chandler. Chandler was a con man at heart, with a long rap sheet of burglary, robbery, and assault. His charm was disarming. The Rogers women saw him as a helpful local. They didn't know he had assaulted another tourist just 18 days earlier. That woman survived, and later testified against him. It wasn't until detectives found a scribbled note in the Rogers rental car and broadcast it on billboards that a tip finally led to a palm print match, and to Chandler. He fought every step of the way in court. "It's ludicrous," he shouted. "Ridiculous." But the jury saw through him. He was sentenced to death in 1994. For 17 years, he lived on death row, isolated and angry. He refused all visitors, even family members who tried to reach out. At some point, he'd removed every name from his approved list, a decision that became permanent once his death warrant was signed. As the clock ticked into Chandler's final day, prison officials offered him a spiritual advisor. He declined. No priest, no minister, no words. Even in the face of death, he refused to reflect. That night, the prison logged no incidents. He remained silent, cooperative, but utterly alone. At sunrise, he stirred, following instructions calmly. He passed on breakfast but asked for a sheet of paper. That request would later take on a disturbing weight. For his final meal, Chandler requested 2 salami sandwiches with mustard and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Simple, even childish. He finished the salami, made it halfway through the PB&J, and drank a cup of coffee. After that, he showered and changed into a white shirt and dark slacks, opting out of prison garb for something more respectable. Just before 2 p.m., an unexpected visitor arrived. Hal Rogers. The man who had lost everything to Chandler showed up unannounced. He had traveled from Ohio that morning with his niece Mandy, who insisted on being there. Hal had once said he didn't need closure. But when Mandy refused to back down, he said, "I'm not letting her walk in there alone." They came together, for each other, and for the family they lost. On the other side of the glass, Chandler's only witness was his lawyer. No friends, no relatives. Just the man who had fought to delay his death. By now, the prison was locked down. Protesters and supporters gathered outside the gates, as they always did. Some held candles, others signs. Inside, 32 witnesses were approved to observe the execution, including reporters, prosecutors, and family members of the victims. Everything was ready. At 4:18 p.m., the curtain inside the witness chamber began to rise, 7 minutes late. But as it did, something strange happened. Chandler already looked dead. Strapped down, IVs in his arms, eyes closed. The room was confused. Had they missed it? But no, the delay was due to difficulty finding a suitable vein. The procedure had not yet begun. Finally, the warden stepped forward. "Inmate Chandler, do you have a final statement?" Chandler, who once told a reporter he'd go out with a bang, "Kiss my rosy red ass," said only one word. No. No apologies. No last-minute regrets. No courage. He never opened his eyes or acknowledged anyone watching. The lethal injection began. Pentobarbital to sedate. Pancuronium bromide to paralyze. Potassium chloride to stop the heart. There were no signs of distress. No gasping. Just silence. A few deep breaths, then stillness. At 4:25 p.m., Oba Chandler was pronounced dead. But this story didn't end there. That note he handed the guards that morning was finally read later in the day. It was short and cruelly simple. "You are killing an innocent man today." After 22 years, 3 lives lost, a mountain of evidence, a trial, a conviction, and 2 decades of silence, Chandler chose his final moment to tell one more lie. Not a word of regret. Not one name mentioned. No explanation. Just denial. A final act of manipulation, even in death. For Hal Rogers, it didn't matter. Closure wasn't something he was looking for, but he had shown up. For his niece, for his wife and daughters, and for himself. He had faced the man who stole everything from him. And in that cold chamber, he watched as the curtain finally fell. As the final curtain dropped on Oba Chandler's life, it wasn't justice that stood out. It was silence. No apology, no reckoning, just one last lie scribbled on paper, denying everything to the very end. For over 2 decades, Chandler had lived in a concrete cage, untouched by remorse and unwilling to face what he had done. And yet, his victims, Joan, Michelle, and Christy Rogers, never had the luxury of a last meal, a final shower, or a quiet goodbye. The man who lured them into a nightmare died peacefully, in stark contrast to the terror he inflicted. But the pain he caused lives on, in the memories of those left behind, and in the quiet grief that never truly fades. In the end, his story is not about innocence or redemption. It's about a predator who met justice, and a father who kept his promise. Not for vengeance, but for love and for the truth.